Hello, namaste, assalamu alaikum, welcome to Good For Us. And today we're going to discuss ICC Men's T20 World Cup 2022 in Australia with the man, the myth, the legendary Jamie Alter. How you doing, man?
Very well. I like to be on your show because we get to talk cricket, but I get these fantastic introductions from you. So always a pleasure, Ajit, to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Let's get into it. We're going to talk about this brilliant World Cup. And I'm going to start off with, obviously there's two groups. We have Group 1 and Group 2. Group 1 already consists of Australia, England, New Zealand, and Afghanistan. Group 2 with India, Pakistan, South Africa, and Bangladesh. So we'll start with Group 1. I want to ask you, how do you see Australia in this year's T20 World Cup?
They're my favorites, not just because they're defending champions, also because I think this team is really up their game in major tournaments. Home World Cup, they have guys, who played the BBL. They've been fairly, I won't say all the guys are successful. I think David Warner only now has come back to form. Mitchell Marsh, again, as always, he rocks up for one game and then he misses the next two. So, but despite these problems they have, I think the bowling, and we've seen that in these two matches against West Indies. I caught a very, very small bit of the first one, but I watched the majority of today's match. And that kind of bowling, yes, it's the West Indies, but they just have that variety. And I think, Aaron Finch's farewell, all these players put together, it just looks like a very, very good team. I mean, you'll know, the effect of what Matthew Wade can do in a knockout match. I mean, I still replay those shots of Hassan Ali. I'm like, that's Matthew Wade, who we've been seeing, for years. So I just think the personnel-wise, they're just a team which you cannot write off. They're at home, so they're my number one team for this tournament.
Fantastic. Well, high praise, especially for defending champions. But this is the old type of Australia where you go for them as favorites, even after they don't have a great year or something. But as soon as the World Cup comes about, they're on it like anything. If you had to pick one player from this Australian team that you think would be the player MVP for Australia, for lack of a better term, who do you think that would be?
Look, I know he's not in the main squad, but what Cameron Green has been achieving the last couple of weeks, fantastic to see whoever took the decision to open with this guy. Fantastic, because he swings from ball one, and I remember there was an over against Bhuvneshwar Kumar. I think he got 6 and 3 or something, or 6 and 2, and then he missed the next 4 balls. But you need that kind of intent. Today he got out playing a pretty ugly shot, but that's what he does, Finch has been fantastic for them in white ball cricket. He's at the end of his career. So opening with him and his problems against the new ball, I see the logic of going for Green. He's not in the T20 World Cup squad. I hope he gets a chance to come in. But if we're looking at someone who's there, I would say someone like a Warner. Just the hunger he has, the way he's come back, and despite all the hardships, today's innings was the kind of Warner when you see him bat like that, you're like, wow. So given the fact that Warner is probably the first name on the sheet, again, home conditions, he knows what's happening. All that's happened the last couple of months, him having to, talks of him going and playing leagues and not playing for Australia, the Big Bash League. I'm glad that Cricket Australia has sort of found a nice, happy space for him. That's probably Ajit going to serve as incentive for him to really repay the faith. So for me, from the current squad, David Warner, if somehow Cameron Green comes in, then hands down for me, Cameron Green.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are talking about Cameron Green, not just because of the batting, but also what he offers with the ball, bowling 140, 145, and he's a fantastic fielder, tall guy. He has all the pluses to be one of the favorites. Huge, man, for sure. Let's talk about England, a team that's just recently beaten Pakistan 4-3 in Pakistani conditions, a team that is considered the best white ball side in the world by many. How do you see them in this T20 World Cup?
They are my number 2 team. If you were to ask me 4 in that sequence, I have said Australia, England number 2. Yes, they've been fantastic in white ball cricket. They got to the knockouts of this tournament last year. They won the one-day tournament. You said they struggled to beat Pakistan, I would say. But again, going back there after 15 odd years, the thing about England, Ajay, is they have so many players who play these leagues. I think that puts them head and shoulders probably above all other teams. I know Pakistanis have also a lot of presence in this league. So teams like England and Pakistan, I look at what they do from a global perspective. And I think these two teams have a lot of players who play. And I think England have a lot of guys in the BBL. But someone like a Joss Butler, at peak of his form, 32, free of playing test cricket, given the captaincy. And he just had, what, 3 weeks to just sit and, chill in Pakistan with VVIP security. So he's a player, yes, you can say, yaar, bande ne khela nahi hai 7 match se. But what he does and how he does in those conditions could really set the tone. So it's England and the one player, I know you're going to ask me, I've already said it, for me, it's Joss Butler.
I think a term that a lot of people started to use for Joss Butler was Joss the Boss last year. And he's definitely bossing it, be it earlier this year and even in the IPL and the form that he's in. I totally agree with you. Let's talk about New Zealand, a team that actually did really well last year, which also had a fantastic 2021, but unfortunately, be it in whatever format, their 2022 has just been horrible. So how do you see them, considering, they are playing in Australia, which are not as similar to New Zealand conditions as people consider to think, because Australia has a different type of condition for every single team in the world, which is awesome from a neutral perspective. But if you're that team that doesn't do well in those conditions, it's horrible. So how do you see New Zealand?
I think just with New Zealand, I mean, as far back as I can remember, they've always been a team to compete with the best. And you look at any ICC event, I'm going to throw in, of course, the 2021 WTC final, which they won rightfully. They were far better in selecting their team for those conditions. I think India lost it because they just picked the wrong team. But again, the common link is it's an ICC event. They've always done well. I think every single time in my memory, barring one, they have made the knockout stage. Yes, Kane Williamson's coming off a long injury delay. He's not been scoring runs. News that Daryl Mitchell perhaps will not be there. But again, New Zealand, these guys also play leagues. And they just seem to, and I think the last year's T20 World Cup was a prime example, getting to the final. And that's an outstanding achievement. And you throw in the bowlers, Saudi Bowl, they've been around at this level for 13, 14 years, You have your Glenn Phillips, you have Devin Conway, Martin Guptill. This is his 7th T20 World Cup, fantastic guys. So it's got that vibe of, guys who always punch above their weight. They probably want to send off Guptill for sure, Bolt for sure, Saudi for sure, Williamson maybe. They want to send these guys off from also what looks to be their last T20 World Cup. So again, they're also in my top 4.
Wow. Yeah, I think with New Zealand, that's the thing. Recently, if we look 2015 onwards, they've just been in pretty much every knockout stage. So yeah, I totally agree with you there. If you had to pick one player though, because you mentioned something that's very crucial. Daryl Mitchell was amazing last year, but him not being available is a huge blow. So who would you pick from the New Zealand side?
I think again it's a tricky one because I see a couple players who perhaps could be impactful, but they would not maybe be names that someone would choose. I think Devin Conway, because it looks like he's going to keep wickets and he bats in that top 3. He's a guy, he's got a lot of shots. He's like a more, how do I say, he's like a more fine-tuned, a more well-oiled David Malan. I know David Malan often gets big runs, but you wonder how did this guy score runs? Because he seems to squirt every second ball down to final leg off an edge. I think Conway's got a more well-oiled game. So he'd be an obvious pick. Again, I go down that list, or what I assume will be the probable 11. No real name stands out because, they're all either 32, 33, or they're rookies. If this guy, Finn Allen, gets a long run, what I've seen of him, inconsistent, but he's like, he's like a Will Jacks or a Harry Brook. When he gets going, the guy can tonk the ball around, So if he plays more, I'd actually put him down. But because I don't see him being a starter, that's why I'm going with Devin Conway.
Yeah, Finn Allen, he is actually, I think you hit the nail on the head with Will Jacks and Harry Brook. That comparison, it's that generation of player who just comes in and has that ability to be super aggressive from the beginning, get-go. Definitely agree with that. Last team from Group 1 I want to talk about is Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan, they get very close, but they seem to not, I would say, crumble under the pressure, or something happens that they're unable to win the big matches. But based on the side that we saw in the Asia Cup, with the fast bowlers they've now actually groomed from somewhere, they've got the spin talent, they've got the hard-hitting batting. How do you see them in this year's T20 World Cup?
Again, it's a team which has come a long way. I think for me, the tournament where they really impressed, and I know that it was very few teams, was the 2018 Asia Cup when it was played as a one-day format
Yeah.
in the UAE. Now, the UAE is where this team, I mean, it's like Pakistan for for the better part of 12 years. It's their home away from home, so they know the conditions. But I go back to that 2018 Asia Cup where I think they should have been in the final. They beat almost every team. They lost very closely to Pakistan, and I think they ended up tying a match with India or something like that. So the progress up until then was very good. But you just said something about fast bowlers. When have we ever assumed Afghanistan will have a an assembly line of fast bowlers? Fazal Huk Farooqi and these guys. No, these are guys who've bucked the trend. They've always had good spinners and a couple big hitters. But I think again, I go back to that league factor. They play so many leagues: CPL, PSL, BBL, Vitality Blast. That kind of experience in different conditions, rubbing shoulders with the best players, playing on different tracks, it does give them a certain edge. But just that said, this is the big boys game. I don't see them being able to consistently challenge all the teams. They could run a few teams close, but in Australia with those big grounds, Afghanistan, despite their growth, despite the fast bowling talent, they're going to have to play outstandingly well to get to the next stage. I mean, I wish them well, but mushkil lag raha hai, from my perspective right now.
Yeah, I completely agree because the sure shot, the logical mind would tell you if it's a team with Australia, England, and New Zealand, and then you've got Afghanistan, it's one of those top three that is considered, even though Afghanistan have come leaps and bounds, there's still that kind of, there is a difference. There's a jump, for lack of a better term.
Absolutely. So this team can beat Bangladesh, they can beat Sri Lanka, they can beat West Indies. I would wager they would, even if Pakistan has one of those days when Rizwan and Babar don't score, I could see them either pushing it very close, like the last match in the Asia Cup. I mean, that match, Pakistan had no business winning that match, but Naseem Shah comes and hits those sixes. What a match, But again, can they do it to Australia? Can they do it to England? They might push India. They might push this Indian team close, but they would need to have three outstanding matches, and as good as they are, I just don't see it happening. I'd love to see it happen, but tough.
I totally agree. If you had to pick one player, though, and I know you might go with Rashid Khan because most people do, but you're going to consider someone else, so I'm happy about this. So who would you have to pick?
I'm going to go with Mujib. I think Rashid Khan, he's been outstanding. I think the bubble is kind of burst around him. Again, maybe he's just playing too many leagues. Maybe it's worked against him. Again, it's Rashid Khan, so he might come back and take 15 wickets in the World Cup. I don't know. But Mujib playing the BBL, Mujib bowling up front, I think he's the best spinner in the power play going around these days. And I think his experience in Australia is going to keep him right at the top. Muhammad Nabi hardly bowls. He's been a fantastic champion for that team. I don't expect much from him apart from just being there for the toss and maybe making some bowling changes. The batting has shown a lot of potential, but on those tracks, can somebody do like what a Kusal Pereira does? What a Kusal Mendes does and score you 350s in 5 matches? I don't think so. If I have to pick one player who'll have a big impact on every match, it's Mujib for me.
Yeah, I think that it is that kind of thought process about Afghanistan. It's Rashid or it's Mujib because they have done it for so long now. So it completely makes sense. Totally. Let's transfer our energy towards Group 2, where I'll start off with India. India, this is probably one of the first times in a very long time where I wouldn't consider India being favorites. I think it's been a while since that's happened, but India, even with the great performances they've had, they just don't look like the team that's going to win it. But maybe that's why they might just win it. That's the thing. That's the thing that could favor for them. So how do you see India going into this?
You spin that wheel and you stop it wherever it stops. No Indian team has liked to go into any tournament, Asjad, as the favorites. Yes, they've won some, but the point is, it's been 15 years since any Indian team won a T20 World Cup. And it's been 9 years since any Indian team has got their hands on an ICC trophy. Now, with India's talent, with their depth, with their might, there's no business for this team to not be winning trophies. But last time around, myself included, that the last video I did before the tournament started was this is why India is going to beat Pakistan. And then Pakistan go and beat them by 10 wickets. So I think that was a wake-up call. I do not see this team in the top four, but they have made a significant change since they exited very limply, I would say, that last T20 World Cup in the UAE. The batting has scored faster. They have got to 190 and 200 about 3 or 4 times more than they did in the preceding 2 years. So I think India, with this batting might, can put up 200 every single match, but then the bowlers are going to give 201. So that is the problem. I'm not, yes, losing a Bumrah is massive, but it's not as big as the collective problems this team has. We've seen it all year. I don't need to even say it here again. The death bowling is just too problematic. And on those big grounds, we have to run faster. There are a few players who, from my perspective, there are question marks over. But again, if the batsmen do click, the way we know they all can, they might make the semifinals. But I don't see it happening.
That's interesting, because I didn't expect you to answer it like they won't even get to the knockouts. But I understand where your thought process is coming from. And I saw your video. I think it was the one before Cyrus Brocha. You did a video of what is wrong with India's
done a lot of these videos, okay, about what's wrong. Despite them having a very good year, otherwise, I think they played 31 matches and they won most of them. But yes, the Asia Cup exposed a lot of problems for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. So if you had to pick one guy from this Indian lineup, I'm not gonna guess it, but I still want to ask you about what's happening in the sky, right? So who would you pick as your player?
The sky is limitless. The sky is limitless. I know Rizwan is ranked number 1, taking nothing away, but just what this guy brings to this team, the fastest to 1,000 runs, closing in on Rizwan and number 1. But I don't see any team which has a player like this. He's not a flash in the pan. He's just, he's not here for, for fun. This is a guy who's at the peak of his games. And I think, in fact, it was Anand Vasu, the respected Indian journalist, when I asked the question, he's like, no, it's because he shed the baggage and he has no more insecurities. इसीलिए ये बंदा आके ये खेल सकता है. Now, anyone who can walk in first ball and do this is obviously special. But it's Ajit, for me, it's not about that. The guy is playing shots with which others do not play, right? The game has moved beyond the dill scoops and the paddles. Who did I see paddle yesterday? Someone, I'm like, yaar, ye paddle maar raha hai, but this guy is playing shots, which are going to leave bowlers rattled, balls which should be punched between mid-off and, and the stumps for 4. This guy's like, he's hitting over fine legs. So there's something about him. And people will say, yeah, he never played in Australia, bigger grounds. Look at the guy's sixes. They're not following, they're going 12 rows back, which in Australia is 2 rows back, and the bigger the grounds, it gives a batsman like him even more range to find the gaps. And I don't think any batsman right now in this format is finding the gaps the way that Surya Kumar Yadav does. So there's no reason to believe that he's not going to have a bumper World Cup. Does that mean that India was going to win the tournament? Absolutely not. But if this guy ends up with the most runs, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, you mentioned a stat right at the beginning about the fact that, he has been that guy who's been just scoring runs upon runs this entire year. The highest run getter this year. So he's doing a fantastic
by far.
job. Yeah. He's so far ahead. His strike rate as well. But then I'll just start talking about Sky for like 10 minutes, and I really don't want to do that because I know time is precious. If we go to South Africa, a team that India just faced in India, on top of that, you saw 2 powerhouses in Riley Russo and David Miller actually scoring big hundreds as well in the T20s, and then in the ODI series that's happening right now, there's quite an interesting dichotomy there with a slightly weaker Indian side, and South Africa looks a lot more prominent. How do you see South Africa going into this T20 World Cup?
I just don't see them being able to do it, not because the weight of history and the fact that they have a habit of somehow blowing these things, but I think not having Van der Dusen is a big blow. Not being able to fit in someone like a Reza Hendricks. I'm not even going to go there, but it's problematic. And I think the Temba Bavuma issue comes down to is someone does someone have an arm around that guy's shoulder, right? Because not being picked for his regional for his domestic franchise
Yeah.
by any franchise, being an iconic player, being a marquee player, that's obviously sent that guy down some very dark hole, and it's evident in his batting. So I think someone just needs to be beyond the World Cup. Is someone taking care of him mentally right now? Because it's clearly visible. I mean, 3 T20s and what, 1 run, 2 runs.
Yeah.
Yesterday's match didn't do anything, getting bowled by deliveries which are good but not great. And then just the baggage that comes with being the captain of any South African team. So I just feel like that's one big factor. But again, they on paper, it's all there, right? Russo, De Kock, Heinrich Klaassen, Miller, Janman Malan, he's in the ODI squad. Who else is there? I mean, they have these players, but
Even Markram.
Markram is ranked, I think he's in the top 3 or 4. But South Africa is just, they always underperform. So they're not even like in my top 5 right now, unfortunately.
No, fair enough. I think the assessment kind of makes sense, and it's very, very visible. I totally agree about Temba Bavuma. He is a very good batsman, but again, his T20 stats don't justify his position. So that would be something that they will have to look at moving forward. From a player to watch out for from South Africa, who would you consider?
I think it's foolish to assume that Reza Hendricks is going to play. He'd be an obvious choice. But Riley Rousseau getting the chance to bat in the top 3. This is a guy who's, again, leagues. He's played so many leagues. और उस league में खेल के बंदे को वापस आया है. You can call it his second chance because of the Kolpak rule not being around. So he and these kind of guys are just who've been around, who've tasted success at the international level, but then have chosen to leave their country. Cannot be easy to go and get a more secure career somewhere else, but then get a chance to come back. I think the hunger is more. And after those 2 ducks he got in the first 2 matches, you'd be like, yaar, ye kya zombie leke aaye? But then when he does what he did in the 3rd match, stuff like that says that, and he's played in Australia. So I would say the fact that he bats in the top 3 and there's going to be an early wicket almost every match, this guy is set for a good personal World Cup, not team-wise, personal.
Yeah, I get that. Let's talk about Pakistan, a team that, as you know, has done pretty well in T20s. They've now amassed over 200 T20I matches. They've won a large portion of those, I think around 60% or something. And they've overall had a pretty good time of it in this particular format. If we look at the recent form, however, they haven't won everything, be it at home, be it anywhere. But Asia Cup, they had a pretty good Asia Cup. They went to the final. But there are glimpses to see, okay, the middle order isn't firing. The death bowling isn't as good as they thought it was, especially without the players like Shaheen Afridi and even Naseem Shah, who's recovering now. So how do you see Pakistan faring in this year's T20 World Cup?
It was alarming for me to figure out, or to find out rather, that before the Asia Cup, they played 1 T20 the whole year. It was like we had these mundane 3 test matches, tours to the Netherlands. I'm like, hang on, a team which always is a favorite in my mind for a T20 World Cup has played 1. Like, what is Ramiz Raja thinking? But I said, chalo, there's no point looking for too much logic when it comes to Pakistan cricket. I think the Asia Cup, there was a lot of sparks, but when your strength becomes your weakness, and I'm talking about Babar and Rizwan, right? I mean, these guys for the longest time were vying for the top 2 spots in the rankings, right? But when only 2 guys score runs, and there have been matches, you've seen this, where both have scored runs and the team is lost. Both haven't scored runs and team is lost. Now, when 2 guys are batting 17 overs, बिचारे बाकी लोग जितने भी अच्छे हैं वो क्या करेंगे, right? Someone like an Asif Ali, he's playing the most riskiest job in all of cricket, something like Dinesh Karthik does. Asif Ali, until very recently, was, in my mind, one of the best finishers going around. You might not see it for Pakistan, but look at all the CPLs and BBLs and BPLs. This guy is a proven finisher. When he's not able to finish matches, something gives, right? And I think the Babar and Rizwan of the T20 World Cup last year were far stronger. Right now, Rizwan seems to have a few problems. And I know if he was here, he'd probably ask me to go to YouTube and watch that lovely press conference he gave to all the Pakistani journalists in Urdu when he said, You think I have a problem outside off stump, but when I'm taking balls from off stump and putting them over fine leg, how is it a problem? But I think bowlers have started to figure out with him, and there's just too many matches where he's batting 20 overs and scoring 78, but the team is not getting big totals. Aaj wo chal gaya, but I think Bangladesh were also giving them a scare. So they need to find a way, just like India realized that 175 से World Cup नहीं जीती जाएगी. This team needs to figure out with Rizwan, with Babar, how do we take these 178 for 2, 185 for 3 into a 212 for 9, lose more wickets but get more runs. If they can crack that, yes, I see them in the top 4. Shaheen, no one knows what's happening. I think a lot of bowlers have sort of fallen by the wayside. Pakistan will always have good fast bowlers. Shadab is finally, getting that mojo again. But I just think they're not going to be able to put up winning totals consistently as good as the bowling is. That's my thing. So I don't have them in my top 4. Probably 5, but not 4.
Yeah, no, totally understand that. If you had to pick one player, though, because you talked about Rizwan, you also mentioned a bit about Babar and Shadab. So who would you go for from the Pakistani standpoint?
Look, I mean, I'm a big fan of Babar. I've sort of become a fan of Rizwan, but I've always liked Shadab. And I think did Mickey Arthur say recently that it's good that Shadab finally sort of come back from the wilderness? When he does well, I mean, he's a guy who could take 4 for 13. He could take 4 for 32, but then, and I love to see them send him at 4 and 5. Bhejo. He could do what Mohammad Nawaz did to India. 18 ball 42. I mean, he plays for Islamabad and he bats at 3 sometimes there. In a PSL.
3-4. He's striking at 158 in that tournament.
Because Rizwan and Babar are going to score runs, but they're going to leave too much. So let poor Iftikhar be. Let these guys be. Let Patani Shan Masood ko kya, hats off to him coming back. But I would much rather see a Shadab go, because the guy he just plays these leagues, and I cannot underline the importance of guys who play these leagues. I mean, he's one of the best all-rounders going around. So his experience in Australia, if this team gives him the confidence ke beta jaake tu 4 pe khel lena, this guy could have a very, very good World Cup. Shadab.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I am a huge Shadab Khan fan, and I think his batting is underutilized in the Pakistan.
Absolutely.
Definitely. The last team from Group 2 that I want to mention is the team we haven't talked about this entire time, is Bangladesh, who actually just played Pakistan not too long ago, like literally less than 24 hours ago. How do you see them in this T20 World Cup?
Look, I mean, it's unfortunate, but their T20 game has dipped so much. They're a team which, like Afghanistan, I would have thought would have been a natural fit, but they're having, I think it's probably their worst year in T20s. Shakib, which just lost it. The kind of shots he was playing in the Asia Cup was shocking, Yes, they've got the classic mix of experience and youth, but they just do not have enough. They might push now and then. I think Aaj, when Liton Das was batting, maybe Pakistan would have been like, "Arey yaar, ye kya ho raha hai?" But they just cannot pick the right 11. And I think their T20 game, they're ranked really low. I just don't think they're in a very good space as a T20 side. So sorry if any Bangladeshi fans watching. I mean, it's not a good Bangladesh squad right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that one. Even though their pace bowling looks much better than it has for a long time.
But very blowhot, right? Like Mustafizur goes on a walkabout for 2 series and he doesn't do anything. He loses his pace. Taskeen charged in one day. But I don't know. It just can they put 2 good matches together? Mushkil hai yaar. Mere hisab se, sorry.
No, I totally understand that. If you had to pick one player though, out of that squad, who would you watch out for?
There are 2 guys in this team that I love to see. Mehdi Hassan from his exploits as a test player. But, sending this guy to open in the Asia Cup, and even recently, Karo, you have to do these, like some of these Karo ya Maro type moves, He's very good. I think Mosaddaq Hussain can be a fantastic package. He's sort of like Shadab. He's batting at 6-7. Bhai, usko aage bhejo. These guys who can come in and bowl those flat, spin overs and score quickly. I think they're the most utility players, which is why Nawaz is so highly ranked, which is why Shadab is good. In fact, I was surprised to see in 2 matches in the Asia Cup that Shakib went back to Pacers, because Pacers were being swatted. Bowl the spinners. Spinners are going to win you matches. So between Mosaddaq and Mehdi, it's a tough one. But if Mehdi opens, despite it being Australia, bigger grounds, and I think he could be the player to watch.
Yeah, he's outstanding. I'm a huge fan of his, especially in the test format. He's developed his batting game a lot, and he's a fast bowler, 100%. The two teams that the expectation is they're both going to qualify. So I just wanted to ask you about your general thoughts about Sri Lanka and West Indies.
Sri Lanka, I mean, what an Asia Cup they had, I mean, just fantastic to see. I don't think anyone would have given them a chance. And then that first match, losing to Afghanistan, things look bad. A couple first choice players are back. I think they have a very, very good captain, someone who gets the best out of his players. Again, on paper, very, very good. Am I surprised that they have to come through? No, because their qualities also dipped. I think they've got a decent enough record in Australia. It's not as bad as some other teams. And I think they've also pulled off a couple upsets in Australia, down against Australia in Australia. So this is a team which, are they a top 4 team? I don't know. But like Pakistan, they could be a top 5 team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you had to pick a player, though, because Asia Cup was so good, you have to consider you've got Shanaka, you've got Mendes, you've got Hasaranga, who's just great all the time. Who would you go for?
Yep. I would either go for Kusal Mendes. He opens and he scores pretty briskly. But to look beyond Hasaranga right now in this format, very, very tough. The guy's outstanding. So hands down, Hasaranga for me.
Yeah. And with the West Indian contingent actually being in Australia at the moment, the team just doesn't look the same. And, I don't know if they will qualify. Hopefully they will, again, into the 12s. But how do you see them? And if you had to pick a player from the West Indian lineup, who would that be?
I think every tournament needs a West Indies there because everyone's like neutral favorite as the West Indies. There's no Russell, there's no Narayan, there's no Gale, and I'm glad they moved on these guys because you need to look elsewhere. I think Kyle Mayers is a fantastic player, starting off with 200 what a shot! I mean, though Heinrich Klaassen played a similar shot against India yesterday, which I'm like, okay. The crack wasn't there because there were people in the stadium where it was like empty that day. But if you can do that, and if you can move from scoring 265 something on your test debut to then becoming a T20 opener, I think you've got something special. And on his day, he's like the Stuart Binney. He doesn't have pace, but he can get you 4 for nothing out of the blue. I just, as you would have seen during the course of this talk, the people who bat in the top 3 and who bowl, I think they're the best for this format. So someone like a Mitchell Marsh, when he's fit, batting at 3, bowling 3 overs of seam, these players often end up being the most decisive players. So I think Kyle Mayers would definitely be one. If Nicholas Pooran were consistent, logically, hands down, he should be your favorite. But Banda run nahi marta, so it's very hard to back him.
No, fair enough. Thank you for going into that much detail. I really do appreciate it. I'm not going to ask you about your top 4 because you kind of highlighted it throughout the video, so that's perfectly fine. Just final words. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure as always. For everyone watching, please do like, share, and subscribe. Please do check out Jamie Alter on every single platform. He's on Instagram, he's on Twitter, he's on Space, he's on YouTube, he's everywhere. even LinkedIn. So absolutely love
even
it.
LinkedIn.
So that's brilliant. Thank you very much. And everyone, until next time, please take care.
Thank you, Rajat.